Hi everybody, welcome back to Teen Storytime. Today we will be continuing to read The Westing Game by Ellen Raskin. We are now on chapter 6, titled The Westing Will. Let's see what these characters are about to get themselves into. My name, the young lawyer began, is Edgar Jennings Plum. Although I never had the honor of meeting Samuel W. Westing, for some reason yet unexplained, I was appointed executor of this will found adjacent to the body of the deceased. Let me assure you that I have examined the documents at hand as thoroughly as possible in the short time available. I have verified the signatures to be those of Samuel W. Westing and his two witnesses, Julian R. Eastman, President and Chief Executive Officer of Westing Paper Products Corporation, and Sidney Sykes, M.D., Coroner of Westing County. Although the will you are about to hear may seem eccentric, I pledge my good name and reputation on its legality. Breathless with suspense, the heirs stared pop-eyed at Edgar Jennings Plum, who now coughed into his fists, now cleared his throat, now rustled papers, and now, at last, began to read aloud from the Westing will. I, Samuel W. Westing, resident of Westing County in the fair state of Wisconsin in the great and glorious United States of America, being of sound mind and memory, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament. First, I return to live among my friends and my enemies. I came home to seek my heir, aware that in doing so I faced death, and so I did. Today I have gathered together my nearest and dearest, my 16 nieces and nephews. What? Sit down, Grace Windsor Wexler. The lawyer stammered an apology to the still standing woman. I was only reading. Those are Mr. Westing's words. If it's any comfort to you, Mrs. Wexler, Judge Ford remarked with biting dignity, I am just as appalled by our purported relationship. Oh, I didn't mean... Hey, Angela, Turtle called the length of the table. It's against the law to marry that doctor-to-be. He's your cousin. D. Denton Deer, patting Angela's hand in his best bedside manner, pricked his finger on her embroidery needle. I can't tell who said that with this chatter, Sidell Pulaski complained. Would you read that again, Mr. Lawyer? Today I have gathered my nearest and dearest, my 16 nieces and nephews, sit down, Grace Windsor Wexler, to view the body of your Uncle Sam for the last time. Tomorrow its ashes will be scattered to the four winds. Second, I, Samuel W. Westing, hereby swear that I did not die of natural causes. My life was taken from me by one of you. Oh, Chris's arm flailed in the air. His accusing finger pointed here, no, there. It pointed everywhere. His exaggerated motions acted out the confusion shared by all but one of the heirs as they looked around at the stunned faces of their neighbors to confirm what they heard. Rereading her notes, Sidell Pulaski now uttered a small shriek. Eek! Murder? Does that mean Westing was murdered? Sandy asked to the heir on his left. Crow turned away in silence. Does that mean murder? He asked to the heir on his right. Murder? Of course it means murder. Sam Westing was murdered, Mr. Who replied. Either that or he ate once too often in that Greasy Spoon coffee shop. Thea resented Who's slur on the family business. It was murder, all right, and the will says the murderer is one of us. He glared at the restaurant owner. Have the police been notified of this charge? Judge Jord asked the lawyer. Plum shrugged. I presume they will perform an autopsy. The judge shook her head in dismay. Autopsy? Westing was already embalmed. Tomorrow, he would be cremated. The police are helpless. The culprit is far too cunning to be apprehended for this dastardly deed. Oh my! Flora Bumbach clapped her hand to her mouth on hearing dastardly. First murder, now a swear word. I, alone, know the name. Now it is up to you. Cast out the sinner, let the guilty rise, and confess. Amen, said Crow. Third, who among you is worthy to be the Westing heir? Help me. My soul shall roam restlessly until one is found. The estate is at the crossroads. The heir who wins the windfall will be the one who finds the... Ashes, the doorman shouted. Some tittered to relieve the unbearable tension. Some cast him a reproachful glance. Grace Wexler clicked her tongue and Sidell Pulaski, Shh! It was just a joke, Sandy tried to explain. You know, ashes scattered to the winds so that So the one who wins the windfall gets... Oh, never mind. Fourth, hail to thee, O land of opportunity. You have made me the son of poor immigrants, rich, poor, and respected. So take stock in America, my heirs, and sing in praise of this generous land. You, too, may strike it rich who dares to play the Westing game. Game? What game? Turtle wanted to know. No matter, Judge Ford said, rising to leave. This is either a cruel trick or the man was insane. Fifth, sit down, Your Honor, and read the... Fifth, sit down, Your Honor, and read the letter this brilliant young attorney will now hand over to you. It was uncanny. Several heads turned towards the coffin, but Westing's eyes were forever shut. The brilliant young attorney fumbled through a stack of papers, felt his pockets, and finally found a letter in his briefcase. Aren't you going to open it? Theo asked, as the judge resumed her seat and placed the sealed envelope in her purse. No need. Sam Westing could afford to buy a dozen certificates of sanity. The poor are crazy and the rich are just eccentric, Mr. Hu said bitterly. Are you implying, sir, that the medical profession is corrupt? Denton Deer challenged. Shh! Sixth, before you proceed to the game room, there will be 1 minute of silent prayer for good old Uncle Sam. Floribund Bach was the only heir to cry. Crow was the only one to pray. By the time Sidel Pulaski could assume a pose of reverence, the minute was up. Chapter 7. The Westing Game. 8 card tables, each with 2 chairs, were arranged in the center of the game room. Sports equipment lined the walls. Hunting rifles, ping-pong paddles, billiard cubes, a full rack, Turtle noticed. Bows and arrows, darts, bats, rackets. All looked like possible murder weapons to the jittery heirs who were waiting to be told where to sit. Theo wandered over to the chess table to admire the finely carved pieces. Someone had moved a white pawn. Okay, he'll play along. Theo defended the opening with the black knight. On hearing Plum's throat-clearing signal, Sidel Pulaski switched the painted crutch to her left armpit and flipped to a fresh page in her notebook. Shh! 7th. And now, dear friends, relatives, and enemies, the Westing game begins. The rules are simple. Number of players, 16, divided into 8 pairs. Each pair will receive $10,000. Each pair will receive 1 set of clues. Forfeits. If any player drops out, the partner must leave the game. The pair must return the money. Absent pairs forfeit the $10,000. Their clues will be held until the next session. Players will be given 2 days' notice of the next session. Each pair may then give 1 answer. Object of the game? To win. Did you hear that, Crow? Otis Amber said excitedly. $10,000! Now aren't you glad I made you come, huh? Shh! That was Turtle. The object of the game was to win, and she wanted to win. 8th. The heirs will now be paired. When called, go to the assigned table. Your name and position will be read as signed on the receipt. It will be up to the other players to discover who you really are. 1. Madam Shin Lin Hu, cook. Jake Wexler, standing or sitting when not lying down. Grace Wexler did not understand her husband's joke about position. Mr. Hu did, but he was in no mood for humor. $10,000 was at stake. Both pleaded for their absent spouses. Emergency operation. My wife doesn't even speak English. To no avail. 1 table remained empty and moneyless. Turtle Wexler, witch. Floribund Bach, dressmaker. Sighs of relief greeted the naming of Turtle's partner, but Floribund Bach seemed pleased to be paired with the kicking witch. At least, her face was still puckered in that elfin grin. Turtle had hoped for one of the high school seniors, especially Doug Hu. Christos Theodoricus, birdwatcher. D. Denton Deer, intern, St. Joseph's Hospital, Department of Plastic Surgery. Theo protested. He and his brother should be paired together. Chris was his responsibility. Mrs. Wexler protested. Dr. D should be paired with his bride-to-be. D. Denton Deer protested, but silently. If this had been arranged for free medical advice, they, whoever they were mistaken. He was a busy man. He was a doctor, not a nursemaid. But Chris was delighted to be part of the outside world. He would tell the intern about the person who limped into the Westing house. Maybe that was the murderer, unless his partner was the murderer. This was really exciting, even better than television. Alexander McSuthers, doorman. J.J. Ford, judge. Appellate Division of the State Supreme Court. The heirs watched the jaunty doorman pull out a chair for the judge. It had never occurred to them that Sandy was a nickname for Alexander, but that could be what Sam Westing meant by "it will be up to the other players to discover who you really are." Or could it? The judge did not return the chip-toothed smile. Doorman, he calls himself, and the others had signed simple things too. Cook, dressmaker. The podiatrist had even made fun of his position. She must seem as pompous as that intern putting on airs with that title. Well, she had worked hard to get where she was. Why shouldn't she be proud of it? She was no token. Her record was faultless. Watch it, Josie Joe. Westing's getting to you already, and the game has barely begun. Grace Windsor Wexler, heiress. James Shin Hu, restaurateur. Grace Windsor Wexler ignored the snickers. If she was not the heiress now, she would be soon. What with her clues, Angela's clues, Turtle's clues, Denton's clues, and the clues of Mr. Who's obedient son. $5,000 lost. Oh well, who needs Jake anyway? She'd win on her own. You'll be happy to know that Mr. Westing was really my Uncle Sam, she whispered to her partner. So what, thought Mr. Who. $5,000 lost. He should have told his wife about this meeting, dragged her along. Sam Westing, the louse, had cheated him again. Whoever killed him deserves a medal. Berth Erica Crow, Good Salvation Soup Kitchen. Otis Amber, deliverer. The delivery boy danced a merry jig, but Crow, her sore foot squeezed back into her tight shoe, headed for the table with a grim face. Why were they watching her? Oh my God. Did they think she killed Wendy? Could the guilty know her guilt? Repent! Crow limps, Chris Theodorakis noticed. Theo Theodorakis, brother. Doug Who, first in all-state high school mile run. They slapped hands and Doug jogged to the table 7. Theo moved more slowly. Passing the chessboard, he saw that the white had made a second move. He countered with a black pawn. Maybe he should not have written brother, but like it or not, that was his position in life. Chris was smiling at him in pure sweetness, which made Theo feel even guiltier about his resentment. I guess that makes us partners, Miss Pulaski, Angela said. Pardon me, did you say something? Sidel Pulaski, secretary to the president. Angela Wexler, none. Angela stepped tentatively behind the secretary, not knowing whether to ignore her disability or to take her arm. At least her crippled partner could not be the murderer, but it was embarrassing being paired with such a... No, she shouldn't feel that way. It was her mother who was upset. She could feel the indignant anger without having to look at Grace. Her perfect daughter was paired with a freak. What good luck, the hobbling Sidel Pulaski thought. Now she would really be noticed with such a pretty young thing for a partner. They might even invite her to the wedding. She painted crutch white with little pink nosegays. Denton Deer was troubled. What in the world did Angela mean by none? And here it's spelled N-U-N, like a nun. Once again, Edgar Jennings Plum cleared his throat. Nasal drip, Denton Deer whispered, confiding the latest diagnosis to his partner. Chris giggled. What's the crippled kid so happy about? The intern wondered. 9th. Money! Each pair in attendance will now receive a check for the sum of $10,000. The check cannot be cashed without the signature of both partners. Spend it wisely or go before broke. May God thy gold refine. A piercing shriek suddenly reminded the Westing heirs of murder. While passing out the checks, the lawyer had stepped on Crow's sore foot. Is this legal, Judge? Sandy asked. It is not only legal, Mr. McSuthers, Judge Ford replied, signing her name on the check and handing it to the doorman. It is a shrewd way to keep everyone playing the game. 10th. Each pair in attendance will now receive an envelope containing a set of clues. No two sets of clues are alike. It is not what you have, it's what you don't have that counts. Placing the last of the envelopes on table 8, the young lawyer smiled at Angela. Sidel Pulaski smiled back. This makes no sense, Denton Deer complained. 4 clues typed on cut squares of Westing super-strength paper towels lay on the table before him. Arms and elbows at odds, with fingers fanned, Chris tried to rearrange the words in some grammatical, if not logical, order. Hey, watch it! The intern shouted as one clue wafted to the floor. Flora Bombach leaped from her chair at the next table, picked up the square of paper, and set it face down before the trembling youngster. I didn't see it, she announced loudly. I really didn't see it, she repeated under the questioning gaze of her partner, Turtle Wexler. Which? The word she had seen was plain. The players protected their clues more carefully now. Hunched over the tables, they moved the paper squares, this way and that way, mumbling and grumbling. The murderer's name must be there, somewhere. Only one pair had not yet seen their clues. At table 8, Sidel Pulaski placed one hand on the envelope, raised a finger to her lips, and tilted her head towards the other heirs. Just watch and listen, she meant. She may be odd, but she's smart, Angela thought. Since each pair had a different set of clues, they would watch and listen for clues to their clues. He, the delivery boy slapped his partner on the back. That's us, old pal, Queen Crow and King Amber. What's this? On or no? Doug Who turned a clue upside down and right side up again. Theo jabbed an elbow into his ribs and turned to see if anyone had heard. Angela lowered her eyes in time. J.J. Ford crumpled the clues in her fist and rose in anger. I'm sorry, Mr. McSuthers. Playing a pawn in this foolish game is one thing, but to be insulted with minstrel show dialect. Please, Judge, please don't quit on me, Sandy pleaded. I'd have to give back all that money, and I would just break my wife's heart. And my poor kids. Judge Ford regarded the desperate man without pity. So many had begged before her bench. Please, Judge, I lost my job, my pension. I can't fight no more. I don't quit just because of some nonsensical words. Sticks and stones can break my bones, but words will never hurt me, she had chanted as a child. Words did hurt, but she was no longer a child, nor a hanging judge, and there was always the chance. All right, Mr. McSuthers, I'll stay. J.J. Ford sat down, her eyes sparkling with wickedness. And we'll play the game just as Sam Westinghouse played it. Mean. Flora Baumbach squeezed her eyes together, screwed up her face. She was concentrating. Haven't you memorized them yet? Turtle didn't like the way Otis Amber's scrawny neck was swiveling out of his high collar. And what was Angela staring at? Yes, I think so, the dressmaker replied, but I can't make heads or tails of them. They make perfect sense to me, Turtle said. One by one she put the clues in her mouth, chewed and swallowed them. Gibberish, Mr. Who muttered. Grace Windsor Wexler agreed. Excuse me, Mr. Plum, but what are these clues to? I mean, exactly what are we supposed to find? Purple waves, Sandy joked with a wink at Turtle. Mrs. Wexler uttered a cry of recognition and changed the order of her two clues. It's still gibberish, Mr. Who complained. Other players pressed the lawyer for more information. Ed Plum only shrugged. Then could you please give us copies of the will? A copy will be on file, Judge Ford began. I'm afraid not, Your Honor, the lawyer said. The will. He paused and tried again. The will not be filed until the first of the year. My instructions specifically state that no heir is allowed to see any of the documents until the game is over. No copy? That's not fair. But wait, they did have a copy. A shorthand copy. Sidel Pulaski had plenty of attention now. She smiled back at the friendly faces, revealing a lipstick stain on her front teeth. Isn't there some sort of last statement? Sandy asked Plum. I mean, like the intern says, nothing makes any sense. 11th. Senseless, you say? Death is senseless, yet makes a way for the living. Life, too, is senseless unless you know who you are, what you want, and which way the wind blows. So on with the game. The solution is simple if you know whom you are looking for. But heirs, beware. Be aware. Some are not who they say they are, and some are not who they seem to be. Whoever you are, it's time to go home. God bless you all, and remember this. Buy Westing Paper Products. Chapter 8. The Paired Heirs. During the night, Flora Baumbach's itsy-bitsy snowflakes raged into a blizzard. The tenants of Sunset Towers awoke from clue-chasing, blood-dripping dreams, bound in twisted sheets and imprisoned by 15-foot snowdrifts. No phones, no electricity, snowbound with a murderer. The slow procession looked like some ancient mysterious rite as partner sought out partner on the windowless stairs. The silent pairs threaded through the corridors in the flickering light of the crooked and color-striped candles, the product of Turtle's stint at summer camp. These handmade candles are both practical and romantic, she said, peddling her wares from the apartment to apartment door to frighten tenants at 7 in the morning. Oh, it's only Turtle. And colored stripes tell time, which is very handy in your electric clock, if your electric clock stopped. Each stripe burns exactly 1/2 hour, more or less. 12 stripes, 6 hours. How much? Not wishing to take advantage of this emergency, I reduced the price to only $5 each. Outrageous! Even more so when the electricity came on 2 hours after her last sale. Sorry, no refunds. No matter, what was $5 to heirs of an estate worth $200 million? Clues, they had to work on those clues. Behind closed doors. Whisper, someone may be listening. Not all the heirs were huddled in plotting, puzzle-solving pairs. Jake Wexler had retreated to his office after a long and loud argument with his wife. He sure could have used half of that $10,000, but he wouldn't admit it. Not to her. The forfeited money upset her more than the murder of her uncle, if he was her uncle. 5 floors above, Jake's partner stood before the restaurant's front window, staring at the froth on the angry lake and beyond. No one had bothered to tell Madame Who about the Westing game. Other players were snowbound elsewhere. Denton Deere in the hospital, Sandy at home. No one gave a thought to where Otis, Amber, or Crow might be. But Sidel Pulaski was there, thumping her crutch against the baseboards as she limped through the carpeted halls on the arm of her pretty partner. Not one, but 7 tenants had invited her to morning coffee or afternoon tea. Murderer or not, they had to see Pulaski's copy of the will. 3 lumps, please. Angela drinks it black. Your health? Thank the Lord I'm still able to hobble about. Your job? I was the private secretary to the president of Schultz Sausages. Poor Mr. Schultz. I don't know how he'll manage without me. Your shorthand notes? Thank you for the refreshments. I must hurry back from my medication. Come, Angela. One heir had not invited them in, but that didn't stop Sidel Pulaski from barging into apartment 2D. Hi, Chris. Just thought we'd pop in to see how you're doing. Don't be scared. I'm not the murderer. Angela's not the murderer, and we don't think you're the murderer. Mind if I sit down? The secretary toppled into a chair next to the invalid before he could reply. Here, I stole a macaroon for you. It's so sticky you'll be tasting it all day. I must have 6 strands of coconut between my upper molars. Chris took the cookie. Just look at that smile. It could break your heart. Angela wished her partner had not said that. It seemed so insensitive, so crude. But at least Sidel was talking to him, which was more than she was able to do. Angela, the fortunate one, standing like a dummy. I know Denton wants to work on clues with you. He's snowbound, too. You ver pretty. How did pretty come out? He meant to say nice. Chris bent his curly head over the geography book in his lap. She wasn't laughing at him. It was all right to ask her because she was going to marry his partner. What are grains? Angela did not understand. Chris fanned the pages of the book to a picture in a wheat field. Grains. Oh, grains. You want to know the names of some grains? Let's see. There's wheat, rye, corn, barley, oats. Osh! Angela thought the boy was going into a fit, but he was only repeating her last word. Oats. Sidel was puffing her warm breath on the window and wiped the frosted area clean with her sleeve. There, now you'll be able to watch the birds again. Anything else we can do for you, young man? Chris nodded. Read me short news. The pretty lady and the funny lady moved quickly out the door. One limped, but it was a pretended limp, he could tell. Not like the limper on the Westinghouse lawn. Oats. Chris closed his eyes to picture the clues. 4 plain grain shed. Grain. Oats. Otis Amber. 4 plus D from shed. Ford. But neither delivery boy or the judge limped, and he still hadn't figured out she or plane. He'd have to wait for Denton Deere. Denton Deere was smart. He was a doctor. Chris raised his binoculars to the cliff. Wind-blown drifts buttressed the house. Something moved on the 2nd floor, a hand holding back the edge of a drape. Slowly, the heavy drape fell back against the window. The Westinghouse was snowbound, too, and somebody was snowbound in it. Only one of the players thought the clues told how the $10,000 check was to be spent. Take stock in America, the will said. Go for broke, the will said. In the stock market, Turtle said, and whoever takes the most money wins it all. The whole $200 million. They're clues. C, as in CEA. Mountain, AM-O. Stood for symbols of 3 corporations listed on the stock exchange. C, CEA, MT, the abbreviation for mountain, AMO. But AM and O are separate clues, Flora Bombach said, to confuse us. But what about the murderer? I thought we were supposed to find the name of the murderer. To put us off the track. If the police suspected murder, she'd be in jail by now. Her fingerprints were... To put us off the track. If the police suspected murder, she'd be in jail by now. Her fingerprints were all... Her fingerprints were over everything in the Westinghouse, including the corpse. You don't really think one of us could have killed a living, breathing human in cold blood, do you, Mrs. Bombach? Do you? Turtle did, but the dressmaker was a cream puff. Don't you look at me like that, Turtle Wexler. You know very well I could never think of such a thing. I must have misunderstood. Oh my, I just wish Miss Pulaski had shown us her copy of the will. Turtle returned to her calculations, multiplying numbers of shares times price, adding a broker's commission, trying to total the sums of the $10,000 they had to spend. Flora Bombach may have been wrong about the murder, but she was convinced of Turtle's plan. What about buy Westing paper products? I'm sure that was in the will. Great, Turtle exclaimed. We'll do just that. We'll add WPP to the list of stocks we're going to buy. Flora Bombach had watched enough television commercials to know that buy Westing paper products meant that as soon as she could get to the market, she'd buy all of the Westing products on the shelf. Still, it felt good having a child around again. She'd play along, gladly. You know, Turtle, you may be right about putting our money in the stock market. I remember the will said, "May God thy gold refine." That must be from the Bible. Shakespeare, Turtle replied. All quotations were either from the Bible or Shakespeare. Mr. Who moved aside a full ashtray with a show of distaste and rearranged the clues. Purple fruited makes more sense. Grace Wexler looked across the restaurant to the lone figure at the window. Are you sure your wife doesn't understand English? I mean, after living here for so long? That's my second wife. She came over from Hong Kong 2 years ago. She does look young, but it's hard to tell the ages of people of the Oriental persuasion, Grace said. Why was he glaring at her like that? Your wife is quite lovely, you know, so doll-like and inscrutable. Who bit off half a chocolate bar? He had enough problems with the empty restaurant, a lazy son and his nagging ulcer. Now he has to put up with this bigot. Grace lit another cigarette and rearranged the clues to read Purple Waves. You heard that doorman say Purple Waves. It must mean something. And that ghastly secretary was wearing a dress with purple waves last night, not to mention her crutch. You should not speak unkindly of those less unfortunate than you, Who said. You're quite right, Grace replied. I thought the poor thing handled her infirmity with great courage. Traveling mimosa, my future son-in-law says. He's a doctor, you know. Anywho, Pulaski couldn't possibly be the murderer, not the way she gimps around. Besides, how could my Uncle Sam know she'd wear purple waves to his funeral? Who waved the cigarette smoke from his face? The murderer had to have motive. How about this? A niece murders her rich uncle to inherit his money. Good sport that she was, Grace tossed back her head and uttered an amused ha 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 ha. Not that I care, Who said. That cheating moneybags got what he deserved. What's the matter? Look! Grace pointed to the clues. Fruited purple waves for C. S-E-A. 4C. The murderer lives in apartment 4C. I live in apartment 4C, Who barked. If Sam Westing wanted to say 4C, he would have written the number 4, letter C. S-E-A means sea, like what a turtle swims in. Come now, Mr. Who, we are both being silly. Have you spoken to your son about his clues? Some son, if you can catch him, you can ask him. Who stuffed the rest of the candy bar in his mouth? And some business I've got here, everybody orders up, nobody orders down. That coffee shop is sending me to the poorhouse. You and your Angela and that Pulaski woman, they didn't show us the will. They didn't give us their clues. They didn't pay for 3 cups of jasmine tea and 6 almond cookies. And you smoke too much. And you eat too much. Grace threw her coin purse on the table and stormed out of the restaurant. Change, that's all he'll get from her. He'd have to beg on his knees before she'd sign Grace Windsor Wexler on that $10,000 check, that madman. Some pair they made, Attila the Hun and Gracie the Useless. Gracie Windclopple Wexler, heir pretender, pretentious heir. First, the money. They signed their names to the check. Half would go to Doug Who's savings account, half would go to Theo's parents. Next, the clues. His N on to the 4. Maybe they're numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, Theo guessed. I still say on is no. The bored track star said, his clasped hands behind his head, leaned back in the coffee shop booth and stretched his long legs under the opposite bench. And no is what we got. No real clues, no leads, no will. After 3 cups of coffee, 2 pastries, and a bowl of rice pudding with cream, Sidel Pulaski had offered nothing in return. Theo refused to give up. Are you sure you didn't see anything unusual at the Westing house that night? I didn't kill Westing, if that's what you mean, and the only unusual thing I saw was Turtle Wexler. I think the pest is madly in love with me. How's that for luck? Get serious, Doug. One of the heirs is a murderer. We could all get killed. Just because somebody zapped the old man doesn't mean he's going to kill again. Dad says... Doug paused. His father's comment about awarding a medal to the murderer might be incriminating. Theo tried another tack. I was playing chess with somebody in the game room last night. Who? That's what's strange. I don't know who. We'll have to find out which one of the heirs plays chess. Since when is chess playing evidence for murder? Well, it's something to go on, Theo replied, and another thing. The will said no 2 sets of clues are alike. Maybe all the clues put together make one message, a message that points to the murderer. Somehow or other, we'll have to get the heirs to pool the clues. Oh, sure, the killer can't wait to hand over the clues that will hang him. Doug rose. Snowbound or not, he was going to stay in shape for the track meet. For the rest of the day, he jogged through the hallways and up and down the stairs, scaring the nervous tenants half out of their wits. Judge J.J. Ford had no doubt that the clues she had shared with the doorman were meant for her. But Sam Westing could toss off sharper insults than that. Skies am shining brother. His choice of words must have been limited, therefore these clues were part of a longer statement. A statement that named a name, the name of the murderer. No, Westing could not have been murdered. If his life had been threatened, if he had been in danger of any kind, he would have insisted on police protection. He owned the police. He owned the whole town. Sam Westing was not the type to let himself get killed, not unless he was insane. The judge opened the envelope given to her by the incompetent Plum. A certificate of sanity dated last week, having thoroughly examined, keen mind and memory, excellent physical condition, signed, Sidney Sykes, M.D. Sykes. That sounded familiar. The judge scanned the obituary she had cut from Saturday's newspaper. Samuel Westing and his friend, Dr. Sidney Sykes, were involved in a near-fatal automobile accident. Both men were hospitalized with severe injuries. Sykes resumed his Westingtown medical practice and the post county coroner, but Westing disappeared from sight. Sykes was Westing's friend, and, she remembered, a witness to the will, but he was also a physician in good standing. He would accept his opinion on Westing's sanity for the time being at least. Back to the clues. Look at her, the big-time judge, fussing over scraps of Westing's super-strength paper towels. Forget the clues, she said aloud, rising from her desk to putter about the room. Nibbling on a macaroon, she had stacked the used coffee cups on a tray. If only that Pulaski person had let her study the will. That's where the real clues were buried, among the veiled threats and pompous promises, the slogans and silliness in that hodgepodge of a will. In his will, Sam Westing implied, he did not state, he implied, that 1. He was murdered, 2. The murderer was one of the heirs, 3. He alone knew the name of the murderer, and 4. The name of the murderer was the answer to the game. The game. A tricky, divisive Westing game. No matter how much fear and suspicion he instilled in the players, Sam Westing knew that greed would keep them playing the game, until the murderer was captured and punished. Sam Westing was not murdered, but one of his heirs was guilty of some offense against the relentless man, and that heir was in danger. From his grave, Westing would stalk his enemy, and through his heirs he would wreak his revenge. Which one? Which heir was the target of Westing's vindictiveness? In the name of justice, she would have to find Westing's victim before the others did. She would have to learn everything she could about each one of the heirs. Who are they, and how did their lives touch Westing's? These 16 strangers whose only connection with one another was Sunset Towers. Sunset Towers. She'd start from there. Good. The telephones are working again. The number she dialed was answered on the first ring. Hi there, this is a recording of yours truly, Barney Northrup. I'm at your service. Soon as I get back in the office, that is. Just sing out your problem to old Barney here when you hear the beep. Beep. J.J. Ford hung up without singing out her problem to old Barney. He, too, could be involved in Westing's plot. The newspaper. She would try the newspaper. Surely someone was snowbound there. After 8 rings, a live voice answered, We usually don't supply that kind of information over the phone, but since it's you, Judge Ford, I'll be happy to oblige. Just spell out the names and I'll call back if I find anything. Thank you. I'd appreciate that. It was a beginning. Sam Westing was dead, but maybe, just once, she could beat him at his own game. His last game. Having found what she had wanted in Turtle's desk, Angela returned to her frilly bedroom where Sidel Pulaski, glasses low on her nose, was perched on a ruffled stool at the vanity table, smearing blue shadow on her eyelids. First we tackle our own clues, the secretary said, frowning at the result in the threefold mirror. Unlucky from the day she was born, she now had a beautiful and well-loved partner. There was always the chance that they alone had been given the answer. She unsealed the envelope and held it out to Angela. Take one. Angela removed the first clue. Good. Now it was Sidel's turn. Glory be, she exclaimed, thinking she had the name of the murderer. Her thumb was covering the letter D. The word was Hood. Angela's turn. The third clue was from. Sidel's turn. The fourth clue was spacious. The fifth and last clue was... Angela uttered a low moan. Her hand shook as she passed the paper to her partner. The fifth and last clue was Grace. Grace, that's your mother's name, isn't it? Sidel said. Well, don't worry. That clue doesn't mean your mother is the murderer. The will says it is not what you have, it's what you don't have that counts. The secretary had not yet transcribed the shorthand, but she had read it through several times before hiding the notebook in a safe place. By the way, are you really related to Mr. Westing? Angela shrugged. Sidel assumed that meant no and turned to the clues. Good Grace from Hood Spacious. The only thing I can figure from these clues is good gracious from Hood Space. As soon as the parking lot is shoveled out, we'll peek under the hoods of all the cars. A map or more clues may be hidden there, maybe even the murder weapon. Now let's hear about the other clues. Angela reported on the clues gathered in the game room and during the day's comings and goings. King, Queen. Otis Amber said King Otis and Queen Crow. Purple waves. Mother switched 2 clues around when Sandy mentioned those words. On or no. Doug and Theo could not decide whether the clues was right side up or upside down. Grains. Chris Theodorakis thinks that the clue refers to Otis Amber. You know, grains, oats. MT. Angela showed her partner the crumpled scrap of paper she had picked up along with Sidel's dropped crutch during a Flora Bombox tea party. 500 shares MT at $6 equals $3,000. Broker's commission plus 90, $3,090. I checked Turtle's diary. She is not following any stock with the symbol MT, so it must be one of her clues. MT could stand for either mountain or empty. Excellent, Sidel Pulaski remarked. Her partner was beautiful, but not dumb. Read all the clues together now. Good, Hood, spacious, Grace, King, Queen, purple, waves, on, no, grains, mountain, empty. Sidel was disappointed. It is not what you have, it's what you don't have that counts. And what we don't have is a verb. Nothing makes sense without a verb. What about the judge? Judge Ford thought her clues were an insult, and she said something about playing a pawn in Westing's game. She had a clipping of the obituary on her desk. This obituary. Angela handed Sidel the newspaper taken from Turtle's drawer. What's that? It was a knock on the front door. It was footsteps in the living room. It was Theo. Anyone for a game of chess? He asked, leaning through the bedroom doorway. No, thank you, Sidel replied, looking very busy. Theo smiled shyly at Angela and left. Sidel read the obituary in Turtle's newspaper. The words $200 million were underlined, but she found a more interesting item. Sam Westing was a master of chess. No wonder Theo's so interested. Do you know anything about the game, Angela? A little, she replied slowly, putting the pieces in order. The judge says she's a pawn, and Otis Amber says he's the king, Crow's the queen. Oh, well, it's probably just a coincidence. We can't leave any stone unturned, Siddell insisted, as the will says, the object of the game, to win. What did you say? The object of the game, to win. How about object of the game, twin? Maybe the murderer is a twin. Twin! Siddell liked that. The only problem would be getting the murderer to admit that he or she is a twin. Let's go back to my apartment. It's time I transcribed those notes. Angela helped the invalid to her feet and nervously peered in both directions before stepping into the hallway. Siddell chuckled at her timidness. There's nothing to be scared of, Angela. Westing was murdered for his money, and we're not rich yet. We won't be rich enough to be murdered until we find the name, and by the time we get the money from the estate, the murderer will be locked up in jail. In spite of the impeccable logic, Angela looked back over her shoulder several times on the way to 3C. Strange. Siddell stood before her apartment door. She had slammed it shut on leaving, but had not locked the deadbolt. After all, not even a burglar could get into a snowbound building. Unless... Angela, too frightened to notice that Siddell ran through the apartment with her crutch in the air, found her partner in the bedroom frantically tossing soiled towels from the hamper. Siddell Pulaski stared at the bare wicker bottom, then sank to the rim of the bathtub, shaking her head in disbelief. Someone in Sunset Towers had stolen her shorthand notebook. All right, that's going to end those chapters for now. Next week we will we will begin on chapter 9 called Lost and Found. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to revise the template in the bottom, and it's going to now have all of the 16 characters and all of the clues that have so far been mentioned. So go ahead and see what you can figure out by seeing all the clues, because you have an advantage. You get to see everything. If you really want to take this to a whole new level and play by the rules in the game, what you can do is you can take each section, you can pick a character, and then pick the set of clues that comes with that character. So go ahead and see what you can figure out so far. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye!